For question 26, we're going to be evaluating the following expressions. We need to find what sine is when cosine's inverse is square root of 3 over 2, and we need to find what tan is when cosine's inverse is 1 over 2. So for this first part of sine at cosine's inverse of square root of 3 over 2, it was pretty simple. I first used a calculator, but I also went to the unit circle. Because we're looking for the inverse of cosine, I went clockwise and I found what sine's value was when cosine's inverse was the square root of 3 over 2. So we would go clockwise this way, and our first value that we come across when the square root of 3 over when cosine is the square root of 3 over 2, we have sine's value of 1/2. So we already know, or we automatically know, that sine is 1/2 when cosine's inverse is the square root of 3 over 2. For the second part of what tan is when cosine's inverse is 1/2, that one was a little bit more complicated. I began by first evaluating what's inside these parentheses right here. So using the calculator, I found that cosine's inverse of 1/2 is equal to 60 degrees. We can also find that out by going to the unit circle chart again, and we're looking for the inverse, so we're going to go clockwise, and when we come across the first 1/2, we have pi over 3, or also 60 degrees. So at 60 degrees, we know that sine is square root of 3 over 2. So for this, so we have sine square root of 3 over 2, and we also know our cosine value of 1/2. To find tan, we want to use identities, and the identity that applies to this question is actually going to be tan beta over yx. So we're going to use this right here using these values here. We know that cosine is equal to x, and we also know that sine is equal to y. So we're just going to plug in values here, and we're going to end up with the square root of 3 over 2 over 1/2. Now we want to undo the fraction in the bottom by multiplying by the denominator. So we're going to multiply by 2 in the top and the bottom, and we're going to simplify. We are left with 3 over 1. Tan is 3, the square root of 3, when cosine's inverse is 1/2.